On Thursday, the 18th of September, at a press conference in the UK, President Donald Trump made a stunning announcement. The US wanted to retake Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan. Although it was delivered in his trademark style and off-the-cuff tangent presented as a scoop for the reporters in the room, Trump's comment represents a major shift in US foreign policy. After more than 4 years, the US might once again have boots on the ground in Afghanistan. The announcement was shocking because it was the first Trump administration that had initiated America's withdrawal from Afghanistan after signing a peace deal with the Taliban. A deal that, lest we forget, resulted in American forces slipping out of Bagram Air Base in the middle of the night without telling the Afghan army and leaving behind more than $7 billion worth of military equipment. The Afghan government collapsed soon after and the Taliban swept power. And now, apparently the Americans want back in. Kabul's response was swift, with Al-Amara, one of the Taliban's official publications, describing Trump's remarks as an assault on national sovereignty and an insult to the feelings of the Afghan people. Trump doubled down, writing on Truth Social, and we'll quote him here, "If Afghanistan doesn't give Bagram Air Base back to those that built it, the United States of America, bad things are going to happen." And bad things are going to happen is in all caps and followed by several exclamation points, because of course it is. Trump's insistence and the sudden change in policy raises a lot more questions than it answers. First of all, why Bagram and why now? Second, is the US really going back to Afghanistan? And third, and perhaps most importantly, what does this mean for a region where China is seeking to increase its influence?
Have you ever landed in a new country and instantly regretted not sorting your data plan in advance? Oh my lord, so many times. So many times have I racked up that internet bill. Like, why? Why has this happened? Well, that's where today's sponsor Saily steps in. Saily is an eSIM app, so no physical SIM swapping, no shady airport vendors, no roaming fees that will sneak up on you later. You just download the app, you pick a plan, and you are good to go. You're connected in over 190 countries. One install covers multiple destinations. It's all very simple. It's fast, it's cheap, and it just works. No plastic cards, no nonsense, no fussing around. So, download the Saily app and use the code WarFronts to get 15% off your data plan, or just go to saily.com/warfronts. Again, that's code WarFronts at checkout for 15% off. And now back to today's episode.
Alright, to understand why Trump is fixated on this specific patch of Afghani real estate, we need to explain a few facts about Bagram's geography and that of the nation as a whole. First, the town of Bagram is located about 60 kilometers from Kabul, close enough to easily monitor the capital, but far enough away to be easily defensible. It's a fact that both the Soviet Union, the actual builders of the Bagram Air Base by the way, and the US have taken advantage of it during their respective occupations. When American and Allied forces arrived in 2001, they built the base, fixing damage from years of bombing during the factional fighting of the 1990s. Bagram quickly grew into America's largest military installation in Afghanistan, housing more than 100,000 soldiers at its peak and featuring 2 massive runways capable of handling heavy transport planes. And that brings us to our second point. Logistics. Because Afghanistan is landlocked and surrounded by countries and militaries that are not particularly friendly to the United States, Bagram became a key node in America's military supply chains. If the US ends up retaking the base, these elements, they're still going to be important. Washington can use Bagram to monitor the Taliban in Kabul, and the airbase will undoubtedly be critical for moving troops and supplies without relying on vulnerable road networks. However, they won't be the main factor. That, in Trump's own words, is China. During the UK press conference, President Trump mentioned that Bagram is an hour away from where China is building its nuclear weapons. He was referring to Western Xinjiang, the province where China borders Afghanistan, and according to a policy brief by the non-profit think tank, the Orion Policy Institute, the site of Beijing's rapid nuclear buildup. Quoting the brief here, "The silo construction at Yumen and Hami in Xinjiang constitutes the most significant expansion of the Chinese nuclear arsenal ever. With 120 silos under construction at Yumen, another 110 silos at Hami, a dozen silos at Jilantai, and possibly more silos being added, the People's Liberation Army Rocket Force, or PLARF, appears to have approximately 250 silos under construction, more than 10 times the number of intercontinental ballistic missile silos in operation today." End quote. China's nuclear arsenal might grow even further as Beijing increased defense spending by 7.2% this year. The explosive pun intended, growth of China's nuclear program explains the urgency with which Trump is trying to take back Bagram. For decades, Washington has relied on a network of overseas bases to rapidly respond to crises and to reassure allies that the US can project power when needed. That network stretches across Europe, the Middle East, and even Africa, but since leaving Afghanistan, not into Central Asia. China's westward nuclear expansion is happening as America's window to regain a foothold in Central Asia is closing. For the Trump administration, the US needs boots on the ground, or at least eyes and ears, close enough to track what's happening and show allies and enemies alike that America hasn't given up the region. Although other locations have been considered, they each present significant obstacles. According to the New York Times, after the 2021 withdrawal, the Pentagon explored placing troops in Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan. However, Kazakhstan and Tajikistan are members of the Collective Security Treaty Organization, or CSTO, Russia's alternative to NATO. While the alliance was described as lifeless by Dr. Thomas Ambrosio, a professor of political science at North Dakota State University, it would still make it extremely difficult for America to establish bases in these countries. Uzbekistan, although not a member of the CSTO, and despite President Mirziyev's recent meeting with Trump on the sidelines of the UN summit, has its own constraints. According to Polish think tank the Warsaw Institute, Uzbekistan's 2012 foreign policy and 2018 defense doctrines explicitly prohibit foreign military bases from operating on its territory. This leaves Bagram as the most strategically obvious choice for the United States, not just because of its proximity, it's about 2,400 kilometers from the silos in Hami, but because it's the least complicated, underscoring just how truly limited America's options are. This is a point that former National Security Advisor Mike Waltz has been hammering on about for years. In an op-ed for the Military Times, he argued that abandoning Bagram meant the US was walking away from the only airbase in the world located in a country that physically borders China. Apart from the surveillance potential, Waltz believes that having a base in Afghanistan would allow the United States to open a second front in a possible war over Taiwan, increasing the odds of victory. Waltz also points to Afghanistan's mineral wealth as another reason why the US shouldn't have left. US Geological Survey estimates pegged the value of Kabul's untapped rare earth deposits at around $1 trillion. In Waltz's view, having access to those minerals would reduce American dependence on China, which controlled over 69% of rare earth mine production in 2024 and nearly half of the world's reserves. Now, we do have to note here that the US previously spent nearly $500 million developing Afghanistan's mining industry. Corruption and a lack of infrastructure meant they had next to nothing to show for this astronomical sum. Although Waltz is no longer National Security Advisor, having been reassigned to the UN after Signalgate, he is still a member of Trump's inner circle. And regional observers such as Lisa Curtis, director of the Indo-Pacific Security Program at the Center for a New American Security, believe his strategic thinking continues to shape the president's foreign policy decisions. Speaking to DW, she suggested that Waltz had planted the seeds of an idea about Bagram Air Base into Trump's mind. That seed has now sprouted into a tree whose first fruits were Trump's words on the 18th of September. As its shadow looms over Central Asia, we have to ask, well, how likely is it that American forces are going to go back to Afghanistan?
Just before we go any further, just a quick pause to tell you about something we've been cooking up here at WarFronts, and we are excited to share it. And no, it's not the launch of WeebFronts. Jesus Christ, leave me alone. I've got enough channels. But I think it might be nearly as good as that. So have you ever got to the end of the week and found yourself thinking something along the lines of, oh man, I was just feeling so optimistic about the state of the world, and I'd love for that to be ruined by even more war fronts. That would bring me down nicely. Well, good news for you, my friends. I hear you. In fact, we at WarFronts hear you so loudly, we're launching a brand new... It's that site. Subscriber service. Look at this. I set this up. That's where you can go. It's a place for people who see us putting out 6 videos a week and go, amateurs. For $5 a month, you'll get access to 2 exclusive videos each and every week. The first 2 are already up on whether Poland could win a war against Russia. Pretty timely, we know, you're welcome. And on just how South Korea came to make the best tank on Earth. And we've got a lot more in the pipeline, including a weekly show covering the 3 most important war stories everybody else is ignoring. And as a bonus, our writers are also producing 2 in-depth written articles a week for those of you who like to get their information the
old-fashioned way. And now we know what you're thinking, oh man, they're going to paywall videos. This sucks.
Look, I have learned from the mistakes that every other YouTuber who launches something like this before me has made.
No, we're still on YouTube. Everything is as it was before. There are still those 6 videos a week that we are grinding away making for you. You're so welcome. Everything on fronts.co is a bonus for those of you who want to cough up the princely sum of $5 American a month. So, if you want more of my face delivering important but oh so depressing news straight to your eyeballs, head over to fronts.co. God damn it, it's this side. It's so hard. My preview monitors. Here, fronts.co, not com. I couldn't get the com. The co was expensive enough. That's fronts.co, not com. And now back to today's video. Thank you. It also helps support the show. That wasn't in the copy, but it also helps us make videos, and thank you so much. Back to the episode. Now, the answer to this question kind of depends on who you ask. For President Trump, it is a definite yes. Speaking with reporters on Saturday, he said, and we'll quote him here, "We're talking now to Afghanistan, and we want it back, and we want it back soon, right away. If they don't do it, you're going to find out what I'm going to do." This statement suggested 2 things. One, that his administration was negotiating directly with the Taliban about a possible return to Afghanistan, and 2, that Trump is willing to escalate if things don't go his way. For the Taliban, on the other hand, their answer isn't just no, it comes with a side of, that's never gonna happen, my dude. They're not just rejecting American boots on the ground. Their army chief, Qari Fasahuddin, is denying that any negotiations are even happening. In geopolitics, when one side claims that negotiations are taking place and the other insists that there's nothing to see, the truth often lies somewhere in the middle. It is possible that back-channel talks are happening, routed through intermediaries in Doha, but Kabul has every incentive to deny them. According to Shadi Khan Saif, a former Afghanistan and Pakistan correspondent for Reuters, even the hint that they are willing to give up the base would be a humiliation, undermining the sovereignty they fought to reclaim. Therefore, if negotiations are happening and the Taliban are willing to cede Bagram, and again, that is a really big if, these denials give them the time to thread the needle between appearing uncompromising at home while trying to extract concessions from the Trump administration. For Trump, on the other hand, talking about the negotiations publicly gives him leverage and puts the Taliban on the back foot, part of his vaunted art of the deal. Yet even if negotiations are happening and they are somehow going well, that doesn't mean that they'll come to anything. Deals between nations, even those that are allies, can and often do fall through, weighed down by politics and shifting priorities. Now imagine a deal between 2 nations whose worldview couldn't be more diametrically opposed, 2 nations that have killed thousands of each other's soldiers. It shouldn't come as a surprise then, but most regional observers believe that it won't happen. The Taliban have constantly pointed to the Doha Agreement's pledge that the United States would not threaten Afghanistan's territorial integrity, using it as a shield against Trump's demands. If it doesn't happen, Trump is unlikely to use military force to capture the airbase. According to The Economist, seizing and holding Bagram would require thousands of troops and complex logistics. It would cost the American people billions at a time when taxpayers are weary of the cost of wars, and it will cost Trump political capital, as he would be going against his pledge to never start a new war. Internationally, it would attract condemnation from other major powers. China has already accused the US of stoking tensions and creating confrontations, an accusation that might be the ultimate example of the pot calling the kettle a warmonger. But one which would obviously ring true if the US went in all guns blazing. Russia, too, would seize on any American return to Afghanistan as justification for its own actions. The Kremlin would argue that if the United States can disregard the Doha Agreement, Moscow can disregard any international treaties. Again, there's some serious pot kettle vibes going on there, isn't there? But it would give Putin even more justification to keep trying to annex his neighbors. Even among America's allies who reluctantly supported the Afghan mission for 2 decades, there is little appetite for a return. In this case, if a deal falls through, Trump will probably impose even harsher sanctions on the Taliban, allowing him to retain his image as a tough negotiator while avoiding the fallout of sending American soldiers back to Afghanistan. We have to point out, though, that the effectiveness of any extra sanctions is unclear given the sheer scale of the sanctions already on Afghanistan. In the unlikely scenario where a deal does happen, it will probably not be a base handover, nor will it have anywhere near the number of soldiers that once filled Bagram. Experts that DW spoke to believe that the most probable scenario is that the Taliban allows a small number of intelligence officers into the country to help fight Washington and Kabul's common enemy, the Islamic State, Khorasan Province, or ISIS-K, a regional branch of ISIS. Since the Taliban took over, they have clamped down on ISIS-K, but have been unable to stamp it out completely, even with Russia's help. A targeted US presence focused on rooting out the insurgents would allow both sides to achieve some of their objectives without being seen to capitulate. Lisa Curtis cautions that even then, the Taliban would likely want to keep that out of the public eye because of the questions of sovereignty. So, what would the Taliban get in this scenario? Well, that would be the lifting of some sanctions and normalization of the relationship with the United States. Kabul recently announced a prisoner exchange deal with the US as part of normalization efforts, and a potential deal, no matter how narrow the scope, would go a long way in helping to achieve that goal. Kabul might also request aid for its citizens who are still reeling after a magnitude 6 earthquake struck the nation on the 31st of August, killing 2,200 people, destroying 5,000 homes, and making an already precarious economic situation even worse. The earthquake happened amidst threats from the Trump administration to freeze all aid to the nation. UN reports indicate that humanitarian aid to Kabul has dropped by nearly 50%, which, according to health workers and aid officials, has impacted their ability to rescue people. If presented as an aid-for-access bargain, the Afghan people might not be opposed to American forces. Only time is going to tell if the Taliban choose to take that route. America's struggle to make a deal with the Taliban and find a foothold in Central Asia, emblematic of a world that is moving further away from the United States and embracing its main geopolitical adversary, China. Political commentator Ghaffar Hussain, in an interview with DW, put it this way: "I don't think America has anything that the Taliban really wants right now. If they want loans, China can offer that. If they want, aid, China can offer that. China's kind of muscled America out, if you like, so they don't really need America for anything." End quote. The US no longer commands the economic or political leverage that once justified its presence. Beijing's growth as a rival capable of investing in infrastructure and industries like mining has reshaped power dynamics not just in Kabul, but across the broader region. Meanwhile, Russia is trying to establish itself as a reliable security partner for states in the region, despite recent claims by Trump that it's a paper tiger. And more than that, they are actively blaming Washington for the region's instability. Vasily Nebenzia, Russia's ambassador to the UN, attributed the increasing threat of ISIS-K in a speech to the UN. Nebenzia said, and we'll quote him here, "The growing activity of ISIL Khorasan is no coincidence. While hastily leaving Afghanistan, NATO troops abandoned vast quantities of weapons and equipment there, which then fell into the hands of ISIL inter alia." End quote. Those accusations carry weight in regional capitals, and so far Washington hasn't proven capable of countering them. According to Miras Zhiembaev, the head of foreign policy analysis at the International Studies Program at a Kazakhstan-based think tank, Washington needs to have a competent, clearly articulated strategy that is consistently implemented at the ground level. He believes that the region's leaders are pragmatists who prioritize economic growth, security, and sovereignty and hate being forced to choose sides. They will work comfortably with China on roads and with Russia on security while courting the EU for trade and the Gulf for capital. Kazakhstan, for example, despite being a member of the CSTO and hosting special trainings for the group, has recently been cozying up to China and the West to guard against a potential Russian invasion of its northern territories. These areas have a large ethnically Russian population and might be the Kremlin's next target in a post-Ukraine war world. Washington needs to exist in this new reality where its offers are not seen as inherently better than the competition's, but rather as part of a broader regional tapestry. No one expects Central Asia to be the administration's immediate focus, with everything happening in Ukraine and the Middle East. However, the US shouldn't completely leave the region up to the other powers. If this happens, then Washington risks reinforcing the image of a country pulling back and looking inward while rivals carve out bigger roles in Central Asia. It will communicate that America is comfortable watching from the sidelines while Beijing and Moscow shape the region's future. Once that perception takes hold, it will become difficult to shake off because both allies and enemies will begin planning around an absent America. And the longer this is allowed to persist, the harder it becomes for America to regain credibility. Thank you for watching.